For those who don't know, my name's Kimonti, and I'm currently serving a life sentence for a gang-related drive-by that happened 9 years ago. My victim was innocent. He was also a student who was attending college. His name was Corey Pittman. At this time, I would like to apologize to the Pittman family, because only now have I begun to understand that the enjoyment of life once taken away can never be replaced. And I'm sorry. I first became a gang member when I was around 11 years old. Through my gang involvement brought me an extensive juvenile history. Everything from burglary to robbery, theft of motor vehicles, possession of narcotics, escape, all before my 16th birthday. And the reason that I'm telling you all this is because my history is the life of a lot of kids out there in our community. And my reality as a young man doing life in prison will be their future if we don't start creating better ways of dealing with our children. As a child, I spent years and years in my childhood locked up in our juvenile system. And so have a lot of other adults locked up in our prison system. And that's because a lot of the problems that young troubled kids have never get addressed. In the United States, we got countless amount of children that are living with child abuse, sexual assault, neglect, abandonment, suffering from bipolar disorder, ADD, ADHD, depression. There isn't any programs. There isn't any classes, and there isn't any counselors that teaches a child how to deal with these traumatic events or the best way to deal with these disorders. And that's because our justice system spends all their resources on punishing them for their crimes instead of trying to help them through their mistakes. If you understand that a child has lived a rough and damaging childhood, that in itself should play a major role in how a child is sentenced and in choosing a method in how a child is rehabilitated. Because the only way you're going to make rehabilitation effective for a child is by understanding the needs of that individual. Because a lot of our children are in the streets suffering mentally. And when they make these mistakes, they're being punished without being offered any alternatives. So they begin to understand the consequences, but what they don't understand is what they can do different. Because you can't possibly think just telling a child to go to school is going to make all the problems in their life go away. Because the truth of the matter is, just being able to survive out here in the streets is more important than English. And being able to feed yourself is way more important than math. And that's sad. But unfortunately, everybody's not blessed with a supportive family and a safe and stable environment. And when you got laws in place that prevents a child from working more than 26 hours a week, and job requirements that state that you need at least 3 to 5 years experience plus a high school diploma or a GED, it makes life seem kind of impossible for somebody who's young. So how is a struggling 15 or 16-year-old kid supposed to survive when you've created a system that tells them since they're not old enough, they can't take advantage of the opportunities that our society has to offer? But on the same token, if they commit a crime or a violent offense, that they can be sent to prison, and in some cases for the rest of their life. Now, I can't even begin to understand how our justice system can even consider sending a 15 or 16-year-old kid to prison when they have so many resources at their disposal. According to the Juvenile Disposition Manual, the court and the state hold sole discretion on the cases in which they order an examination to determine whether the respondent is amenable to treatment. And that reported examination shall include, at a minimum, the following: the respondent's version of the facts, the official version of the facts, the respondent's offense history, an assessment of problems in addition to the alleged deviant behaviors and the respondent's social, educational, and employment program. But they're only willing to use this discretion when it involves nonviolent sex offenses, when every child is amenable to treatment. And that discretion should be used in every case, whether it's their first offense or it's their fifth offense, whether it's a violent or a nonviolent situation. Because every last one of these juveniles that is in and out of these juvenile facilities and has ended up going to prison has been available, but they refuse to offer them proper help, especially in cases where it's obvious that they are still developing physically, mentally, and emotionally. At this time, I'd just like to invite up just a few young individuals just to give y'all a sense of the type of people that they are allowing to overcrowd our justice system. Among these young men are men serving a life sentence. And they're serving a life sentence for a crime that they committed when they was between the ages of 14 and 15 years old. Also among these young men are decline cases. Cases where they was once again young men sentenced to do adult time for crimes that they committed when they was just juveniles. Now these are all perfect situations and when discretion should have been used, and an assessment should have been made, and a treatment program and a rehabilitation plan should have been put together. That way the life of the child would have been spared, and justice would have been served on terms deemed reasonable by our society. Excuse me for a minute. Because everybody knows that teenagers are immature and irresponsible. And when you combine that with constant drug and alcohol abuse, they tend to be more susceptible to peer pressure and negative influences. And that's what an assessment would have came to realize. And an assessment would have also came to realize that the majority of these kids that they are sending to prison can barely maintain a 9th grade education. And it's not because they refuse to go to school. It's because when they were going to school, they was having a problem learning. So to prevent from being treated like they was dumb, they acted out and became disobedient. And they was labeled as problems instead of children with learning disabilities. And as a society, we tend to spend too much time prejudging situations and basing our decisions off emotions instead of taking the time to seek out the facts that should be considered when the lives of so many children are at stake. Because there's a big difference between a child who was faced with a situation that he's never been faced with before, and he makes the wrong decision, versus somebody who's a complete danger to our society. And I think that's the main reason why kids never make the FBI's most wanted list, and why we never see children's faces on America's most wanted. Because I think it'd be pretty hard to convince America that a 15-year-old is threatening the security and the safety of our country. In closing, I'd just like to note that the volunteers and sponsors at the BC does not condone any of the criminal activity that these young men were involved in. Nor are we asking you to overlook them. But what we are asking you is to never lose sight of the fact that we are dealing with children. And that fact in itself should tell us that their potential to be great and successful far outweighs any of the mistakes that they've made in their past. And your focus should be on creating ways to help these young individuals mature out of their phases instead of into them. That's my time.